So we've got a great group here now, so we might get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jackie Bell, and I'm a Program Director at the Next Economy, and I'll be moderating today's webinar with Lisa. We will be recording the session this morning, and then we'll send a link out to you all after probably in the upcoming week. So you should have received a little permission notification as you jumped in today. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians of the land in which we're all individually meeting from, and recognise their ongoing sovereignty over their land and waters. I acknowledge the work of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders and leaders across Australia who are protecting and caring for country and challenging all of us about what good development looks like. I would also like to particularly acknowledge the Gunakurnai people of the Latrobe Valley and extend an appreciation for their participation in the project we are going to be discussing today. For those that don't know much about the Next Economy, we're a not-for-profit economic development agency that works with communities and regions across Australia that are struggling with change, particularly economic change brought on through decarbonisation and other disruptions. Our mission is to help them figure out how to move forward in a way that is not only good for people, but it's also climate safe and regenerative of our natural systems. And so for the last 8 years or so, a lot of our work has had a focus on the energy transition and working with regional communities, particularly coal mining communities, around the question of how do we manage change as we move away from fossil fuels and to an economy that is powered by renewables, and how do communities that might see that as a threat actually see it as an opportunity to build stronger, more resilient regional economies. We work with local councils, industry groups, businesses, state government, civil society, environmental groups and community members, and by their invitation we help them with planning and strategising around how they will navigate and manage this change. The Latrobe Valley is one region in which the Next Economy has had the privilege to work in on and off over many years. And last month, we released a report on a project that set out to explore the range of perspectives that different community leaders have at this moment in time on the region's energy transition. Titled What Next? Community Perspectives on the Energy Transition in the Latrobe Valley, this report presents a summary of the insights shared by community participants and makes visible the immense amount of experience and knowledge that exists across communities in the region. Whilst this project is an initiative of the Next Economy, it would not have been possible without the commitment of Latrobe Valley residents who participated and the funding and project support that we've received from Bank Australia and Environment Victoria, and we thank them for their ongoing support. So today we have people attending from different parts of Australia and I believe actually also overseas. And from different parts of the world, so in terms of industry, government, not-for-profit sector and academia. So everyone in this space is coming with varying levels of understanding of Latrobe Valley's history, context and the local transition journey. The session today provides an opportunity to hear about some of that journey and then learn about the project and insights from the work, as well as deepen our understanding of the opportunities that can come through engaging local community members as valuable partners in working towards good transition outcomes. I'd like to introduce you to my colleague and the project lead and author of the report, Lisa Lumsden from the Next Economy, and who over the next 20 minutes or so, she's going to take us through the project findings and share some insights from the work. As I said at the start, we will ask you to remain on mute during Lisa's presentation, but we will have time to address questions and have a discussion afterwards. So if you do have any questions or comments, please, I encourage you to put them into the chat feed as Lisa is speaking, and I'll keep my eye on that and we'll have a chat after she's finished. So over to you, Lisa. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Jackie, and hello, everybody. We'll just move to the first slide, Jackie. So I thought I'd start with a brief summary of the project that we undertook. And it came about because we had a number of conversations during 2021, 2022 with a range of community, government and industry representatives in Latrobe Valley. And we found that people were consistently expressing concerns that community views remain largely underrepresented in formal transition activity and planning activities. So this became the project idea. And the reason we decided to focus on Latrobe Valley was that the energy transition there is unique, as are all other parts of Gippsland. Latrobe Valley is a region grappling with the closures of the remaining coal-fired electricity plants, as well as a growth in renewable energy developments across the border region. It's also unique because substantial transition work and progress has already been achieved. But of course, there's still much work to do to support workers, businesses and the community to manage that change well. So we set out to engage with a diverse group of community leaders and local residents to understand their views regarding what good energy transition processes and outcomes look like, where progress has been achieved and the energy transition challenges that remain in the Latrobe Valley, and initiatives and actions or ideas and opportunities that could contribute to better transition process and outcomes. Okay, next slide. So the project activities we undertook involved a desktop review of over 29 regional plans and strategies related to economic development and the energy transition, in-depth interviews with 11 community leaders to understand the range of perspectives on regional opportunities and challenges, as well as the barriers to participation. There was an online workshop with 14 participants to report on the findings from those initial analyses, validate those findings, gather additional insights and design the next steps. And a full day in-person workshop in Morwell with 23 community lead members that was more of a detailed enabled us to get more of a detailed understanding of the transition opportunities and to prioritise potential interventions for consideration. So it was an iterative co-design process that facilitated rich and nuanced reflections from a group who represented a diverse range of residents. Ultimately, the project enabled us to engage 31 community leaders and local residents, including 5 First Nations people, young people, people from the multicultural community, grassroots environment groups, small businesses and the social service sector. And then in June, I know some of you here today came to the event, we had an in-person forum in Traralgon to present the initial project findings to 35 industry and government representatives, including presentations from 6 community people on the priority initiatives that had come out of the workshop. Next slide. So without further ado, let's get into the project findings. But just before I do, I'd like to draw your attention to the introduction, where there's a timeline of energy transition milestones as identified by project participants. And the first being the Hazelwood fire in 2014. For those both familiar and unfamiliar with the Latrobe Valley's transition journey, it might be an interesting opportunity to just reflect on how far the region has already come. Okay, so next slide. And the first section of the report shares some insights into community perspectives on what constitutes good transition outcomes. And the community workshop participants were invited to share their vision for the Latrobe Valley energy transition, and we asked them to complete this statement. We know we're achieving a good energy transition when, and before I show you what they said, I'd like to invite you to ponder the same question. And perhaps pop your answers in the chat, because we found it to be quite an inspiring process to go through. All right. So what the group said, Jackie, was, we know we're achieving good energy transition when the health and well-being of people and the planet are prioritised. We have hope for the future of the valley. Every person has the resources they need to be happy and healthy. Everyone has equitable access to affordable energy. Communities are engaged and understand the changes. People can influence decisions that affect their future. Traditional owners are respected as custodians of the land. We work together openly, equally, and collectively. The economy offers local community stability. The environment is protected and nurtured, and our efforts to minimise climate change are working. And I think what really stood out was how the workshop participants see the energy transition as an opportunity far beyond job creation and Australia's national decarbonisation agenda. And if managed well, they see the transition providing opportunities to transform the systems that underpin our society, the regional economy and people's relationships with the environment. And to me, this was quite striking. So the next slide, there were 8 major themes, theme areas that emerged out of the data, and this is them. And I'll go into them in more detail as we go through. But in each theme, participants identified the progress that had been achieved, the challenges, as well as initiatives, with the potential to generate more positive transition outcomes for the Latrobe Valley. And I won't have time to go into all the details, of course, but I hope to offer you a good summary of the key ideas conveyed. So the first of those themes was socioeconomic disadvantage, equity and livability issues. And on each of these slides, you'll see in the blue quotes from people that were involved in the project. The Latrobe Valley faces a range of socioeconomic challenges, particularly in relation relative to the surrounding local government areas in the Gippsland region. And participants agreed they didn't want to see the energy transition exacerbate those challenges. In fact, they wanted to see the social challenges addressed and prioritised in all the transition efforts. They wanted to see energy transition make a tangible difference to how the most disadvantaged groups in the Latrobe Valley experience life. And they acknowledged that good social justice outcomes so far had included the implementation of recommendations from the Hazelwood Mine Fire Inquiry, the Hazelwood Health Study, the creation of the Latrobe Health Assembly, union representation in closure negotiations and more. And they identified groups of 3 opportunities. So to employ processes to design for positive community outcomes. They wanted to integrate community wealth building strategies into the transition plans. And people repeatedly raised a desire to legislate requirements for industry to meet its social obligation and community benefit commitments with local communities. Develop integrated housing solutions. Participants would like to see the development of housing solutions integrated into all the processes, with housing needs for First Nation people and those experiencing disadvantage as a key priority. Several specific ideas for initiatives were identified and they're listed in the report. And the last opportunity there was to ensure affordable energy access. People wanted opportunity to address energy poverty in Latrobe Valley, particularly increasing energy efficiency of public housing stock. The next theme was community participation. So during discussions, many participants acknowledged a range of efforts and improvements by community groups, unions, government agencies and companies to manage transition well and to make positive changes happen for the region. But participants saw opportunities to deepen community participation in local and regional development by expanding community capacity to participate meaningfully in decision making. And workshop participants reflected on the socioeconomic barriers to participating and described ideas to address these. There were opportunities to improve community awareness and understanding of the energy transition. So many participants identified that a key barrier to participation is the broad lack of community awareness and understanding around what's happening in the transition. And participants describe this disconnect as the fuel for fear, speculation, and misinformation. Participants agreed that they wanted to see more constructive communication and facilitated public discussions on a variety of transition topics. And those topics were things like the power station closure rationale, coal worker transition issues, transmission lines, mine remediation options, carbon capture and storage, and renewable energy generation. And the third opportunity was to expand the level of diversity and inclusion in engagement activities. Many participants expressed concern regarding the lack of diversity and noted low or no participation from young people, First Nations people, socially and economic disadvantaged groups, multicultural and immigrant communities. Ideas to overcome the barriers to diverse participation included timing and locating workshops and meetings appropriately, ensuring participants feel safe to express diverse views and be respected, and providing payments for people's time and reimbursing costs associated with participation. Okay, next one. 3, institutional capacity and good governance. The capacity of institutions to manage and govern the energy transition in the Latrobe Valley came up in many discussions. The LVA is considered to play a valuable facilitation role by many, contributing to greater interagency coordination, improved philosophical alignment between the state and federal government. People felt was providing clearer policy direction and signalling that decarbonisation is the direction we're moving. And the state government's commitments to revitalise the State Electricity Commission and return state electricity to the public was widely positive. Participants, however, questioned the government's rationale behind setting commitments on climate and emissions while simultaneously supporting the extended lifespan of coal and gas, and suggested the rationale for any decisions to be clearly communicated with local communities who are impacted directly. They saw opportunity to improve governance practice within the institutions, and there were 3 there: govern for social environment outcomes, and I've sort of spoken to that in terms of the social outcomes people were looking for, but they also wanted to see governments work collaboratively with local community to ensure environmental impacts met local expectations. And they see room for far greater policy enforcement, referencing the failure of industry to deliver on local procurement commitments as an example. Investing in outcomes and providing funding certainty. Many believe that the way government funding programs operate can undermine the effectiveness of existing institutions and good programs. Participants called for a minimum of 3-year funding arrangements for all energy transition related organisations, such as those providing social support, First Nations organisations, and those doing employment and training, so they can all just get on with doing the work. And greater planning, coordination and accountability. People noted the significant amount of resources the Latrobe Valley energy transition had received to date. And they spoke of too many high-level plans, lacking clear accountability and public progress updates. And the idea of a transition progress assessment committee was proposed, being an independent body that publishes an annual report on how transition commitments are tracking. Environmental protection. Participants agreed that the protection of the environment and remediation of mine sites are receiving more attention compared with the previous 5 to 10 years, but they continue to be concerned about the negative impacts that development activities have had on land, biodiversity and waterways. They spoke to the urgency of climate change, expressed a desire for stronger environmental protections, long-term and creative solutions to coal mine and site management, and greater support for self-determined traditional owner leadership. They used words like regeneration, repurposing, protecting, enhancing, and healing to describe their hopes for the future of local land, water, air quality, and biodiversity. They saw opportunities to support community engagement, environmental management, community-led problem solving around the remediation and rehabilitation, and they outlined several actions that might encourage this greater engagement. Increasing the role of traditional owners in improving the health of the environment was repeatedly raised in this context too by both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people. And improved coordination of the regulatory system. Some participants believe a lack of coordination and connected planning doesn't enable the interconnected nature of the local environment to be well considered. And some had concerns that the cumulative environmental impacts were poorly assessed. So participants were clear that they didn't want to prevent, they want to prevent past environmental mistakes from happening again, and spoke of opportunities for stronger legislation, higher requirements for industry to operate. And they sought expectations that reflect community and traditional owner values. First Nations leadership. The traditional owners who participated in this project reflected that First Nations people were increasingly engaging in the region's energy transition. which is great. And some organisations have demonstrated an active and meaningful improvement in their approaches. This progress was attributed to strategic advocacy activities, cultural obligations, generations of fighting for justice and rights, experienced negotiation skills of First Nations people, and evolving mainstream culture. And they see opportunity to improve organisational engagement practices and adequately resource First Nations organisations to be able to participate in the planning and decision-making processes, requiring a commitment to social outcomes as part of legislative development application processes was suggested as one early entry point that might improve the early traditional owner engagement in benefit sharing conversations and activities. This is a repeating theme, the planning process, the role of the planning process. And to ensure traditional owners have decision-making power. And by this, they meant leveraging opportunities to support community-led initiatives that foster greater respect and self-determination, land access, capacity building, collaborative partnerships, and funded roles for First Nations people. New energy development. All participants recognise that changes in the local energy sector and the economy are well underway, and that's not surprising. The key markers of the change included the coal mine closures, establishment of the LVA, the Latrobe Valley Authority, for those who aren't aware, the development of renewable energy projects, and the reinstatement of the State Electricity Commission. They reflected that the visibility of projects under construction or in operation was also starting to make the renewable energy transition more real. Participants noted the difference that better engagement practices by industry made to social licence for new projects, and a list of the good practices people mentioned is provided in the report for your reference. Many participants noted the negative social, economic and psychological impacts that privatisation of the energy sector had had in the 1990s, and they described the experiences as traumatic, with many connecting those memories with some people's reluctance to embrace energy changes today. They saw opportunities to address the existing cultural tensions surrounding the region's changing identity. And people spoke of the proud history, providing 100 years of electricity to Victoria, and raised concerns that this contribution went underappreciated, especially in the push for the new across the region. Arts and cultural activities were suggested by multiple participants as a way to support the healing, to tell a different story, and assist with the psychological process of change. And people suggested opportunities to address concerns around the economic impact of the energy transition. Many people across the Latrobe Valley continue to equate the energy transition with a loss of jobs and relative economic stability, which isn't surprising either. The revitalisation of the State Electoral Commission was seen as a potential opportunity to alleviate some of these concerns. And people referenced opportunities for the State Electoral Commission to deliver social outcomes that were similar to the pre-privatisation era, and improve cultural and gender diversity in the energy sector. Regional economic development. Economic development, resilience, diversification, these are all key focuses for state and regional economic development organisations. But interestingly, it was not a major theme identified by participants. Conversations on this topic often mentioned new industry ideas, local entrepreneurism, and small and medium enterprise support. And some people drew a link between new development models being a continuation of economic models that they saw responsible for the social and environmental problems already experienced in the Latrobe Valley. The people saw opportunities for additional support for locally led initiatives aligned to the community's vision. And there are lots of new business ideas circulating. My goodness, every single person I spoke to had an idea or more than one. And participants would like to see increased support and focus on exploring and developing those ideas developed by people in the Latrobe community, and especially ones developed by First Nations people. And they saw opportunities to grow a strong creative industry in the Latrobe Valley. And you can see a quote there from a young person who had ideas in that regard. And second opportunity there is targeted government investment for new industry development. Participants felt there was a huge new industry opportunity for long-term economic growth related to decontamination, remediation and repurposing of the mine sites in the valley, as well as the ongoing land management. They saw opportunities to develop an intensive manufacturing strategy for the Latrobe Valley that capitalises on their local energy infrastructure but operates according to circular economy principles. And access to affordable and sufficient finance was said to be constraining the speed with which small and medium-sized businesses are able to both decarbonise and diversify. So increased support on this front was also raised. And finally, workforce development. Participants broadly acknowledged that a lot of well-deserved attention was being directed towards workforce development, especially programs related to getting the young and the non-participating workforce into work readiness and training. Participants clearly had an ambition to maximise the potential benefits of future job opportunities for local community members, which fed an urgency. There was an urgency to understand the job requirements, inspire young people and get started with the training initiatives. Interestingly, people were, however, cited the existing workforce shortages in the region, and they questioned the role of worker migration to meet future energy needs, and questioned whether Latrobe Valley could attract, welcome and retain new multicultural workers. The opportunities they described related to providing certainty to on future energy work through improved communication and engagement. And in general, participants don't believe that the Latrobe Valley community knows about the planning that has been done in this space. And people saw that there was the job uncertainty was impacting people's motivation to pursue the new opportunities. So one idea was the development of a future Latrobe Valley jobs profile that explicitly answers people's questions in an easy to read way. And the questions, there's quite a few questions as to what people are wanting to know in regards to the personal impacts and opportunities that there are in Latrobe Valley specifically. And those questions are detailed in the report. They saw opportunities to improve training and apprenticeships. So some project participants saw were keen to expand unemployment and training programs, especially those that involved youth training and work experience. They also saw value in greater collaboration between education providers and the social support services to keep people in education. And one idea was to work with current energy coal generators to build up larger numbers of apprentices and use them to provide, use the generators to provide the base training and develop the transferable skills, provide the work experience that was needed for the future industries. And creating a more diverse and inclusive workforce in the Latrobe Valley. Participants wanted to see more intentional efforts made to increase energy workforce diversity, offering suggestions like developing flexible education training models and encouraging migrant families to establish roots in the Latrobe Valley by offering incentives and support to start local businesses. So they're the 8 themes, and I'm going to finish by talking to some good practice principles. So in addition to the insights generated by participants, the process and the project also highlighted a range of good practice principles that can guide future engagement activities. And there's quite a few listed in the report, but a few of the key ones are listed here. So recognise community as a knowledgeable and influential partner in the energy transition. I think this report really reflects the incredible insights that people have. And I think that there's a huge contribution that knowledge can make. Proactively seek out and involve diverse community representatives and organisations at each stage of the process so that different values, experiences and perspectives can inform process design and decision making. Tailor community engagement to the different contexts and needs of community groups to enable the participation of diverse stakeholders, especially those currently underrepresented. Build relationships and nurture trust between community organisations, industry and government so that conversations are deeper, more frequent and lead to increased collaboration. Build community capacity to effectively participate in transition work through a focus on strengthening people's understanding of all the options, strengthening their linkages and networks across the community, and resourcing their participation, including appropriate remuneration. Recognise the community's historic role in industry development and the value of this contribution to enabling energy supply for Victoria, and always provide feedback to the community regarding their impact, how their contribution affected the decisions and outcomes. So I'm going to conclude by just saying that we found that all stages of the project, participants were interested in contributing their perspectives, especially regarding the creation of positive community outcomes for the Latrobe Valley, and a wealth of ideas was generated by community members when they were given the safe space and encouragement to participate in deep discussions. So this work has demonstrated that a significant opportunity exists to strengthen community participation in energy transition planning and development activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm just going to pop myself back up there and say so I can see everyone.
I haven't seen any of the chat, so I missed all of it.
Yeah, there's been a few great comments, and I do encourage you, everyone, to please pop in more. I'm actually going to make it possible for you to unmute yourself now. If you do have a question for Lisa based on what she's shared today, please do feel free to jump in. We'd love to, got a good sized group that we can have a bit of a free flowing conversation. And thank you again, Lisa, for sort of diving into a little bit more of that detail. I know that through the project, there was just such a wealth of knowledge and learnings and ideas. I mean, I was getting I know I personally got really excited by some of the community-led initiatives that, with the right wraparound support, had great legs for the region. And so, yeah, it's pretty amazing to see that you've been able to wrap that up and synthesize in a way for everyone to sort of get a little glimpse into the project and what was shared. So I've Sabine, I can see you there, and I've seen another question from Kristen, but I'm going to kick you off, Lisa, with one question on something that I know has come up in other discussions, was the how, particularly with regard to the good practice principles, where you talked about tailoring community engagement, building relationships, creating spaces that are safe. Could you just, for everyone's benefit, maybe give a little insight into what are some of the things that you did for this project and the way in which you worked to try and model that as for the project approach?
Well, when I started conducting the interviews, it became apparent very early on that people really lamented the lack of young people involved in the discussions. And so as we moved towards the workshop and other parts of the project, I made a big effort to try and track down some young people. And I looked up all the youth organisations and reached out to the university and various university clubs to try and attract young people into the conversation. And we did end up having about four young people participate in the project, but I think some of the feedback that they gave as a specific group was that they had some specific ideas about how to advertise to get people involved, to have people, young people design posters, that they've actually felt posters, and despite social media interaction and engagement, they actually said that posters in the windows of shops and cafes that they visit was actually a really effective way for them to know about things. And also the socioeconomic barriers to participation, the realities around being available to participate when actually you're spending a lot of your life just trying to survive and access food. And it was all of those barriers were real factors in being able to participate. So a lot of that came up, and so we implemented some strategies to support participation for some of the marginalised groups that participated. So yeah, that's a few examples.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, I have tried to ask Kirsten McLeod from City of Melbourne to unmute. I'm not sure whether that's working or not. There you go, Kirsten. Thank you. If you'd like to share your question with Lisa, that'd be great.
Thanks, and I should admit, full disclosure here, it's my question comes not so much in my capacity in my role, but from having grown up in the Valley through the 90s. So I was really interested, your reference, Lisa, to that kind of sense of social scarring from past experiences of privatisation and previous transitions, which were not managed well for the local community, potentially making people a bit less keen to engage really meaningfully in conversations around the next, and what kind of good practices you saw which really recognised that, really tackled that head on.
So certainly art was one of the using arts to engage people in interesting ways came up a lot. One of the another idea that was explored by numerous people was, and particularly at the workshop, was the concept of having a range of activities that, like exhibitions and monuments and presentations and things that, and art pieces that actually told the story of the true story of the energy history and celebrated the workers' contributions and the families' contributions, but also acknowledged the privatisation, acknowledged closures, acknowledged the Hazelwood mine fire, you know, the whole journey of all the ups and downs that have been, and also where things are moving to in terms of renewables and other opportunities across Gippsland. So to tell that story, to put it into a bit more of a context, but also there was one idea that having an exhibition, a historical exhibition, and inviting people, workers, to bring in photographs of their grandparents working at the power stations and really celebrate that, you know, there's been a huge contribution that has been made by the Latrobe Valley, and when that's not acknowledged, people get annoyed and upset and hurt, and that makes it harder for them to move forward.
Thank you. And thank you for that's a wonderful question, Kirsten. Really appreciate it. Sabine, I'm going to try and see if you are able to unmute, because I think you also had a question for Lisa.
Thank you. I've got lots of questions, but I'll quarantine myself. Don't worry.
Sure.
My name's Sabine Heindel. I run the Energy Charter, which is a collaboration across 22 CEOs in the energy sector. So, you know, this work is really valuable, and I want to just acknowledge and reinforce to the group that this will certainly be shared across all of our signatory base. We'll probably frame it more as better practice principles, because I always say to our signatories, you can always do more. So we'll start off with good, but we'll encourage them to do even better. And I guess my question relates to that. A lot of what you've been able to share in the report really reinforces, I guess, what we're hearing when we talk to communities in various parts of the country, and particularly those that are being impacted by transmission infrastructure. I guess my question is, what is next? Like, what happens? What do you see as in terms of next steps for these principles? How do we encourage, and it's obviously a range of stakeholders, to do something with this? And you'll excuse my bias for action, but I'm half German and I really like to sort of go, okay, so what? Let's get on with this stuff. What would you encourage to be the next steps based on your terrific work?
I like that whole better practices concept. I might use that. Thank you for your question. I think I suppose all the, I mean, I'd be looking to hope that, and thank you for distributing the report. The further it goes, the better. I think the key to this project and is that involving community in the process is and making sure that you are resourcing and facilitating and creating these safe spaces so that people can feel welcome to participate and contribute to the problem solving and to understanding the issues that are at play is so integral, and it's not common practice to do it in a really deep and meaningful way. I think for me, that is because every community is different. If we're talking about expanding this concept beyond Latrobe, every community is different, and so every community needs to be supported to go through a process of defining their own vision and defining their own aspirations, and then considering how renewables is going to contribute to that. I think that's where the conversation actually needs to move, and efforts need to move. Yeah, that's my personal view. Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. We have a comment/question in the chat feed, and then Bodhi, I'll pass to you. But Georgia actually commented that she loved the idea of celebrating history and arts to connect people. And is there an existing organisation or network that's well placed to create this? And I wondered if you would have wanted to reflect on one of the working groups that was formed from the project around this very concept, but where they're at the moment, and sort of some of the opportunities around that thing of taking action. You know, I think they're really keen to do so.
Are you referring to the Arts Fund?
The Arts Fund, and
you talk to that group, because you work with that group. You talk to that.
Okay. Well, Georgia, I suppose as part of the project process, participants did naturally gravitate into groups around specific ideas or themes that they were interested in terms of opportunities or initiatives for the region. And there was a group of individuals that were gravitate around this idea of an arts fund to activate local artists and regional artists and arts and culture to celebrate and showcase the history and future for the Latrobe Valley. And so they actually wrote up a concept note, and they had some really strong ideas, and where they shared that about a couple of months ago, I think, at the Festival of Big Ideas in Gippsland. But they're there's a couple of great young amazing leaders in that group that are really keen to chat with people that would like to help them get that into the next phase of development. So can follow up with you. But there's several ideas like that that have come out of the project. And so do encourage, if you're curious, we can share those with you. I can see, I'm going to ask to unmute Bodhi. Hopefully that's worked. Got you on your iPhone.
So. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Hi, Bodhi.
Yeah. Hi. Sorry for camera off. I'm just driving. I just wanted to pick up on that conversation about what's next. And I think one of the things that's really fantastic about this report from the perspective of the Latrobe Valley Authority, there is so much going on in the region around energy transition. There's really good relationships and working groups and really practical projects. But for the most part, they're at the government, industry and education sector level. And we do have some representation from community energy groups and organisations. But what I think is really valuable about this report, and what I really love about this report, is that it's that do better thing for the community. It's how do we bring the community into all of the work that's already going on and really allow that work to be shaped by their perspectives, thoughts, aspirations as well. So it's not so much a question, but a comment that what do we do from here is already happening, but it's that we haven't brought community properly into that space as we do it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bodhi.
Fantastic.
And thanks for all your hard work too. You're doing a good job.
Yeah. And recognising there is lots of work being done in the region to try and connect different parts of this complex system of activities together, and there is some really great people and organisations doing work to centre community voices in those processes. So thank you for sharing that. I'm just doing a quick scan of the chat feed, and please, again, if you would like to come off mute, let me know before we wrap up for today. I
love that people are doing all this sharing here in the chat.
I know, it's wonderful.
there's
I
going to be
feel like we all need a cup of tea and just we could chat for a while about some of the great ideas that came out of the process.
I think it's interesting, Jackie.
Yep, sorry, Lisa.
I think it's interesting, Jackie, that people here today are resonating so much with that desire to acknowledge the history, and that says something to me, that there's a real need there, that moving to the new is that there needs to be a pause and an acknowledgement of the past and the journey.
Yeah.
That people are connecting with that. Yeah.
And would you say, Lisa, that's what you heard also from participants in terms of their feeling about that?
I think from a few participants that had because there were a few participants that were focused on that future, and when they heard the findings about this needing to acknowledge the past and the past contributions, they sort of also stopped to pause because they hadn't been in that headspace. So it's interesting to hear again and to observe the conversation now with people getting excited about art, involving art and acknowledging history and telling stories through art. So yeah, it's interesting.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, if we don't have any further questions for now, I feel like I could, chat about this forever and a day. But Lisa, I might, just to wrap up, I suppose our project was a sort of a moment in time of getting a pulse of where a group of community representatives are at. But what are some of the learnings that you have taken, from the project in terms of what could be next for elevating community voices, and or what might you have do differently or do in addition into the future if you had the chance again?
I think this project was a great opportunity to like we've discussed, to demonstrate the contribution that communities can make to the conversation. The scope of the project wasn't huge, and so I think that there's more work could be done to broaden out the work, not just in Latrobe, but if it was replicated elsewhere. So I think that that's what I would look to improve on. I think what next is that, we've birthed a report and we hope that it will go far and wide, and that people will consider the suggestions that people have made. I hope it sparks ideas and motivates people to want to engage and want to invite community in to participate.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And just as I thought there was no more questions, two have come in, and they're really great ones. So Kirsten's just added, and it really links with what you were sharing there. Have you found, and I think you're very well placed to speak to this, have you found that the work and the report and findings has resonated with other communities going through a similar transition? And I know you've just got such a depth of history in Port Augusta. So, I mean, your reflections on how this may or may not resonate.
Yeah, so I think what really stood out to me about this particular community work was that people were really seeing transition to being far beyond, that transition was an opportunity for transformation. I haven't really seen that level of insight into the kind of systemic aspects of energy transition and climate change, essentially. I haven't really seen it to that extent anywhere else. So that was quite different. I'm not familiar with the Hunter, Kirsten, but as in detail, I've been there a few times and done a bit of work there, but not a huge amount. But in terms of comparing it to my years of experience in Port Augusta and their energy transition, but also Gladstone, same thing. I haven't seen this kind of transformative ambition anywhere else, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and really exciting. So thanks for that, Lisa. And Michaela, lucky last for today, and of course we'll always welcome other questions. I'm not sure if you're able to unmute yourself there.
I think that worked.
Yes.
I haven't used Zoom for a while.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa and Jackie, for presenting this, and Lisa for your work with the community. I think we spoke really early on, and it was really interesting hearing your reflections on it. So I think my question is around, I was interested in why there was a low recognition of economic and community development as part of your report back. And I guess I probably would speculate that I think that economic development is something that people think is done to them rather than that's something they can participate in. And also I work in the education sector now, and I think I hear people talk about lack of aspiration. I think it's all that stuff about getting food and, doing things, but the impact of the SEC travels down the generations with I can't do that and it's not possible for me. So I'm thinking, are there lessons out of this report that we can take with that action focus to help us support that? There's some things that university is definitely doing, but it would be good to make sure that we're doing that with the community rather than for or to.
I think it's speculation as to why, for me as well, as to why economic development wasn't a major focus of the conversation. One of the reasons I pondered on was whether that was because it is already a major focus and that people wanted to use the opportunities when they spoke to me, particularly in the interviews, to talk about other things that they felt weren't being given as much attention. But what was striking was that people were much more focused on there was references to big industry opportunities and whole kind of sector ideas, but mostly people were interested in small business, individual people pursuing ideas, collaborating to get, local people's ideas off the ground, which you don't hear as much of in transition conversations. So I thought that was really interesting. And in terms of actions, maybe that's actually where people are going to connect to economic development. Is that real grassroots kind of hands-on? How can they participate? How can they pursue ideas? Be encouraged to pursue ideas level. Yeah.
Which shows a progress given the long-term association with big business and big companies. So that's a transition in itself, I think. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Michaela, and thank you everyone for those fantastic questions. We are going to wrap up today because we're right on time. So there is something for all of us to take away and action from today's session, I think. And before you step back into the day and whatever it is that you next have on your plate, I do encourage, if you have the time, to think for a few minutes about what you've heard and what it might mean for your work. Even if you're not working in the transition space, I think those good practice principles are really interesting to think about how they may be part of your day-to-day activities, wherever it is and whatever it is that you do. So I do encourage that. The next economy, and so Lisa and I, we're just so grateful for you all joining us today, and we do want to remind you that we have recorded the session. We will share it out over the next upcoming week via an email, and we'll put our contact details in that email also. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share with us, or if you would like to discuss the work further, please do reach out onto the emails, because we really do enjoy sharing the work and sharing the stories from of what we've had the privilege to hear from Latrobe Valley. On our website, if you want to stay up to date with what the next economy is doing, jump on our website. We have a mailing list, or keep in contact with us via LinkedIn or Facebook. And again, thank you everyone for coming today, and it's wonderful to see this interest. Thank you to Lisa for all of the wonderful work you've been doing, and we do want to team. And we do really want to thank again our friends in the Latrobe Valley and our other project supporters for their ongoing efforts in supporting really great transition outcomes for the region. And we really hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Cheers.